get that going. Perfect. But we're super excited for this conversation today and really grateful for all of you who have joined us. So we have three great folks on our panel today. I'm going to go around and have each of them talk a little bit about themselves, their fund and their role, and kind of why they're here today. So we're going to start with Joe. Joe, tell us all about you.
Yep, great. Hey everyone, my name's Joe, and I work at Play Ventures. So we're an early stage gaming VC. And yeah, some of the facts are right there with the bullet points below. So we have about 90 companies in the portfolio. Actually, we just announced Fund 3, which is a $140 million fund back in November. So we've got a few more coming through as we start investing from that. That fund, yeah, took us up to 450 million USD in AUM, and we're 14 of us, but we're quite spread out. So our headquarters is in Singapore. We've got 7 there, and then the other 7 are spread out across UK, Finland, France, Spain, Germany, and South Korea. So yeah, my short overview of me and my career is that I have about 12 years in recruiting, talent, HR, with the biggest chunk of that being within the video games industry. So I've been in Play Ventures for a year, but before that, I was 3 years at Epic Games on the Unreal Engine and Fortnite team. And then before that, I was at EA or Electronic Arts, hiring for game studios across Europe. And then for that, I was hiring for startups in London and the UK. So that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Well, we're happy to have you, Joe. If there's any gamers out there, I'm sure they can send you a note and have a cool conversation. Joe and I, before we hit record, we were also talking all about Lord of the Rings. So lots of good content there. Chris, let's hear about you.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris. I work for a fund in London called Manta Ray Ventures. We are investing globally, about 50% across the US and half spread out all across Europe. We don't have a particular sector focus, but we have an ethos on investing in mission-driven businesses. So for us, that's anyone solving a big problem that we think is worth solving. So sector-wise, that translates largely into health tech and sustainability. For obvious reasons, lots of really important problems to solve within those broad areas. But we'll also opportunistically do more sort of societal good things, like a bit of ed tech, cybersecurity, and that kind of thing. We're a pretty small team. We're only 6 people, and we're all based in London. And given the sort of geographical coverage that we have, means that there's stuff going on sort of around the clock on London time. And we've got about 50 portfolio companies. So we're typically an early stage investor coming in at seed, following on at the A type kind of stage. And in terms of my background, I'm not necessarily a finance guy. I spent about 10 years working in startups, doing pretty much everything imaginable, wearing many different hats. And as a result, have ended up in a sort of portfolio role where I oversee that portfolio of 50 companies and try to help them on their way. So when I'm trying to explain my job to people who don't work in tech or venture, I tend to say something like I'm a plumber, but for startups, because when something gets blocked, I get a phone call, and that sort of encompasses my day. It's very varied.
Nice. That's a great analogy. Evan, why don't you introduce yourself today?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks on the call can probably relate to that analogy. It's a really good one. Yeah, I'm Evan. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Getro. Started Getro around 8 years ago. My background is really in recruiting. I had a recruiting business and actually was in the social impact space. I don't think Chris and I have had a chance to talk about that yet, but started there and then really just noticed all the opportunities around how we could better connect people within networks. So started Getro. And yeah, we work with over 850 customers today, mostly in the VC PE space. And so getting very excited about some of the new things that we're launching, especially around helping people make better introductions. And we're going to talk about that quite a bit today.
Nice. That's a great segue into our agenda. So we're gonna have a great panel conversation today. A couple of key points that we want to focus on: warm introductions, like Evan just mentioned. Fun trivia note for folks if they don't already know this, but Getro is a combined word. It stands for Get Introductions, right? So it's all that Getro is about. Strategies for expanding your network and how to do that. And then ultimately, how do you do these things, right? How do you operationalize this? What tools do folks use? What frameworks and strategies to be able to get maximum value from your network? I'm not going to steal. There's some great quotes that Joe and Chris are going to have, and I almost just said one because it was so great, but you'll hear about in just a second about how they kind of think about these philosophies. And at the end, Evan is going to take a couple minutes to talk about how Getro is really supporting these things and some exciting new product releases that we've done over the last couple of months as well. Again, we are recording this session, so we will send this out after the call. And then there is also an open Q&A in the Zoom bar. So for any attendees, if you have any questions, reactions during the conversation, please feel free to use that Q&A. We're very excited to make this interactive. But with that being said, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and Evan is going to pop in and start our conversation today.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, great. Want to start here with this diagram and first just say that when we started Getro 8 years ago, we had our job board product, and that product is still a product that lots of our customers use, but some people don't realize that over the last year and a half, we've actually expanded the product suite at Getro quite a bit beyond that into really being a relationship management solution. And so a lot of the conversations that I've been having over the last couple of years, and even really since the beginning, have been around how do VCs make better introductions, especially with the platform function. So when I talk to platform leaders, you're making introductions all the time. It might be around talent, but it also might be around sales and business development, fundraising, expert network, service providers. There's all this value that exists within the warm network of the fund, and everyone kind of knows that, but it's really hard to utilize that value and actually bring it forward for the portfolio. So that inspired us to build lots of our newer features that we're going to be talking about today. But I think this graph is a good way of thinking about where we see the space right now today. So some funds really don't even think about their network as a utility for the fund. I think these days that's kind of the minority of funds. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we meet with funds, especially at the larger size of AUM, but they've literally hired software engineers and have built tools themselves. Also, the minority of funds, and in the middle is the majority of funds that are looking for ways to leverage products and tools like Getro to really make sure they're tapping into the full value of their network. So that's kind of how we see the landscape. And today, wanted to talk with Joe and Chris. Appreciate you guys joining about how you think about network management, how you think about managing the relationships of yourselves as individuals and the fund, and bringing that to the portfolio. So let's get started. First, I wanted to hear a little bit about why you think network management or network mapping is important for you or your fund. Just kind of high level, how do you think about it? Maybe we could start first with Chris.
Looking at that, like this quote I put up there a while back, and actually I think you could change that and put it as people is a people business. Business is a people business, right? Like no matter what field you're in, at some point it comes down to who you know, because that's how you get things done, right? At some point, a person somewhere has to decide to buy something or sell it or use it or whatever it might be. What I actually hadn't given much thought to when we were doing these quotes is a very long time ago, over 10 years ago. So I actually used to work for an expert network where our whole business was connecting people mostly into private equity funds. And that's kind of how I got my break into this industry. And at the time, I couldn't believe people were paying so much money just to be connected to a so like I'm probably out of date, but the going rate for an introduction to like an exec back then was like $1,000 for a 1-hour intro call to someone. And I'm sure it's not too different these days. And now what's amazing is, given most people who work in venture, because it's a private capital market, you have information asymmetry, and it's all about getting information through people, with people, and so on, will be relatively well networked. they can provide that kind of access, expertise, advice, guidance, whatever it might be, effectively for free. I mean, you're paying for it with your own time by building your network and cultivating those relationships. But of course, that's like a great investment to make. And so to answer the question of why it matters, it's one of the true ways that you can generate value, in the sense of it's not a transaction, because you're not paying someone for a service. You're not going out to the external provider, paying someone $1,000 to make that one introduction, but it's an area in which you can invest time and then truly have a value add, which is kind of rare, because most of the time we're actually procuring products and services.
Yeah, I love that. Thinking about the network as an asset.
Right. And of course, it's compounding, right? Like the more every person you know adds in their connections to the network, so it's purely exponential. By the time you know 1,000 people in a sector or a space or whatever, you kind of are 1 degree away from everyone that counts, you know?
I want to come back to a question about what you just said, but maybe before that, Joe, I would love your high level thoughts on just why is network management important to you in the fund?
Yeah. So that quote there put up on the screen. The reason why I was hired, so someone in the VC purely to focus on talent, both from like delivering hires for the portfolio, but also being there as a consultant for founders and leaders on how to scale their businesses effectively and hiring best practice and all of that, is because the number one request from founders, at least in our experience, is about network connections and hiring. And so we wanted to be more purposeful around that and build a lot more structure around that. I think as well, like the USP for our VC and for many VCs these days is that they want to not just throw cash and add an investment and then crack the whip every board meeting. They want to be there to support and nurture and help as much as possible. So if you can do that as a VC, it builds trust and ultimately creates better returns, right? So I think I think that maybe that's it in a nutshell. Why is network mapping and management important? Well, it's proven. There's some great studies, and all of the sources are leaving my brain right now. But if you do this well, you are more likely to get better returns on the fund, which is exactly what your investors and everyone else wants. But I guess from my perspective, from the warm, fuzzy, more empathy-driven reason, is that I love to see these companies succeed, and you can do that by making sometimes just one hire or sometimes just one incredibly powerful introduction. So that's my answer to your question.
Nice, I love that. Yeah, and the VC platform group did a really great survey on some of these things. Maybe it was a year ago now. But for folks who don't know about that group, it's an amazing community for the platform, for anyone in platform and VC. Very cool. Chris, we may even have this question later in the presentation, but you just made me think of it based on your answer. I'm curious how you think about maintaining relationships. And in a sense, you can kind of think about network as an asset, but at the same time, the relationship strength or the trust that you have with an individual can kind of decay over time if you don't maintain that relationship. I heard someone say one time, it's like people aren't cans of soup. They don't just sit on the shelf for you to just go get when you need something. It's like there's some kind of maintenance that needs to happen. How do you think about that just in kind of the networking world for you?
Even cans of soup go bad. I moved recently
That's true.
after 9 years in the same apartment, and I found some tins of soup that were probably about 5 years out of date at the back of certain cupboards. So even
You're just
those,
eating metal at that point.
exactly. So that's before you go into people. Yeah, I mean, to go back to what's on the screen, like a business is like just a abstract concept, which really solidifies a whole bunch of people. Like, fine, we get a piece of paper that says this is the company's incorporation number. But then it's like just a bunch of people that kind of either go to the same office every day or log into the same tools and talk to each other. But like fundamentally, there's not really anything to a business beyond people. And people are rapidly changing and evolving, and there's different things going on. And we all reflect back to ourselves a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. We were kind of different people in many different ways, and who we hung out with was different, and the places we went to was different, and probably where we were living was different, and right. So it's very easy to like understand how you have that kind of natural rate of decay for everything. And so of course, if you don't check in with someone for X period of time, and that X period of time probably is a function of how well you knew them in the first place, you know, like a high school buddy, you can get away with not seeing them for 10 years, and then you see them and you're like, oh, hey man, what's up? You know, it's whatever, because you actually spent 10 years together, like sat next to each other every day. Like the level of built up association is huge. But someone you had like a 1 hour business meeting with once 10 years ago, you probably can't remember them, and they probably can't remember you. And now all of a sudden you use a great tool like Getro, and it's like, okay, who do we know that, you know, is really smart about this thing? And then you find that person. It's like, okay, we're connected. We connected about 10 years ago. Damn, I can't remember anything about that person, which means they probably can't remember anything about you, right? So that connection in of itself is completely useless. It's only useful if you've actively maintained it over time. And there are many ways of doing that, but the way that I try to do it is, rather than trying to extract from the network as much as I can, I actually try and push into the network as much as I can. So that person I had a meeting with 10 years ago who's super great in their space or whatever, rather than asking them for a favor every 2 weeks to stay top of mind, I'm actually trying to do a favor to them every 2 weeks or whatever to stay top of mind. Hey, here's this thing you might be interested in, or what do you think about, you know, this? Could this person be helpful to you? Can I connect them to you? And ultimately, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to, you know, make connections and share information, but you're reframing it as, I'm trying to take things from you, and I'm trying to give them to you, which makes people much more receptive, and can be a bit more of a like open way of having a conversation. So anyway, the point is, to answer the question of how do you maintain a network, is actually just proactively engage with it and try and help the network as much as you can, be like a central node within it and connect people around it. And then eventually they all kind of find their place within that network through you as a conduit.
Yeah, I love that. We went through the Techstars program, and their motto is give first. And I think that's a huge idea of just pushing out value as much as you can. Very cool.
It's a fine line though, because we all know that one person who's trying to be helpful but ends up being annoying because they send you like a tweet every day. It's like, hey man, did you see this? It's like, oh, that's like tweet of the day. If I wanted to see that every day, I would just open that app, you know. So
so you have to be thoughtful about it.
You have to be thoughtful, and it has to be genuine as well. Like you have to, if you're like naturally curious and you like people and you're trying to figure out what they're doing and you're trying to connect the dots yourself, if you do it like quite authentically, I think it tends to work. If you're sort of running a checklist thing of like, you know, I need to speak to this person once a quarter because they're important to me, and you haven't really given any thought about why.
Yeah, it could start to feel kind of fake.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's quite important.
Nice. Maybe switching gears a little bit, Joe, I'm curious if you could tell us about your point of view specifically on talent. So I know your background's there, your focus there. How do you think about attracting top tier talent? Do you have any strategies you could share specifically around recruiting and attracting great people to the portfolio?
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to talk about Getro, which is all we have. So I think so. My mindset towards this is that I would say about 90%, and that is not a fact. That's just how I feel about those numbers. About 90% of the people that I talk to, I'm not talking about job opportunities like right now that I have in the portfolio. I do headhunting and sourcing on behalf of portfolio companies for really high impact and important roles. But a lot of the time, I'm just trying to find really talented people in our industry. So that could be like gaming, AI, looking at consumer apps. I'm just trying to find the best people there, and also because we do early stage, trying to find the best people, really talented people, usually in leadership positions, that are really open-minded or really wanting to be in early stage companies, because that last part is really hard to find, actually, like people who are genuinely up for the risk,
Mm,
and also very good at swimming in the chaos that is an early stage company. So I spend a lot of my time having these types of conversations. So as and when a role opens up in the portfolio, I can say, hey, I know like 3, 4, 5 great people you should speak to right now. And
mm,
sometimes just for a founder, just getting that ignition started, getting those conversations going, and ultimately trying to make the hires is one way of doing that. And reason why I said I'm going to mention Getro is that we've been building, so since January last year, I've been building out our talent network, which was well, I call it the talent network. I say it was non-existent before. It wasn't, in a system before. It lived in the brains of
mm,
most of the people at Play Ventures. And so now I want a structured list with notes. And so Getro, like through the job board feature, people can sign up to the talent network. They can say what jobs they're interested in, and that filters through into us. And I review that every week, and I reach out to, I'm like, that person looks like they have a great profile, really skilled. They could be an engineer, they could be in biz dev, whatever. I just looking for the really top profiles, and I'll just speak to them and engage with them. And then keep those relationships fresh as and when I want to use it. Going back to
mm,
Chris's point that he just made about trying to add value to them. Like we're just about to start off this newsletter, probably coming out the next couple of days, right? So we built that talent network 12 months ago from zero. It's now at about 1,100 people, and now I'm going to be
mm,
sending out the newsletter, just updates on us as a company, key updates on what our portfolio companies are doing, great jobs that are advertised on the job board, jobs that are not advertised on the job boards that they wouldn't be able to see, and just like sharing interesting resources
cool.
just to remain top of mind and trying to add value. I think my last point here, attracting top tier talent. There's it's a really big topic, but going to the last point I'll say is like the quote I put be proactive, and actually that's the key point here. Play Ventures being proactive enough to hire me, put someone in the talent role, and I'm like all my role is to ensure that our portfolio has the right talent, and they are all, and our founders are trained in a way that allows them to hire the best talent. So I think that's what VCs can do to stand out, is just be proactive about it rather than just opportunistically making introductions.
Mm.
I'll
Yeah, it sounds
stop.
like it sounds like the newsletter strategy is very aligned with that thought, like being able to keep in touch with people, especially people who might be a little bit more passive but open to opportunities. If they're getting to see that content on a periodic basis, maybe it makes them think about you or one of the portfolio companies they didn't know about in the right moment.
Yeah, like the workflow there is right. Like people come into our talent network and they apply. So we've got 1,100 in there. I looked at the numbers and I spoke to about 250 of those last year on video calls, 30
Wow.
minutes. And of that 250, I think I shared about 150 throughout the whole portfolio. So I guess it's, let's say, about 15% of people who apply to the talent network I screen and then send around to all the founders. And the reason why I do that is because I'm looking for those opportunistic hires, but also those opportunistic conversations. Like if I send someone a fantastic round to every founder in our portfolio, they're going to be
Mm,
like, oh, I'd love to speak to that person. It could be a biz dev opportunity, or they just want to network. And I'm trying to build that muscle in our founders as well to be like, you should be having this constant hiring brain. Even when you're not fundraising, you're thinking about laying seeds for future fundraising. Even when you're not hiring,
yeah.
you're thinking about building that network so you can activate it when you need it. So these things that I'm doing consistently, like powered by Getro, which is really cool, is actually being really valuable both for the talent network and both for founders, I'd say.
That's awesome. I'm curious too, maybe Chris, you have thoughts on this. When you have someone in your network, there's kind of an implication you just made, Joe, like someone who's really strong where you just look at the profile and you're like, okay, obviously the whole portfolio would want to talk to this person. Maybe it's like a C-level executive at a Fortune 500 or something. How do you think about when it's the right opportunity to make an ask of that person? And how do you maybe let founders down easy if they make that request and they have kind of an expectation that you're going to make an intro if they see that person and they see that you know them? How do you navigate the nuance of that conversation?
Right. So learning how to say no, when to say no, I think is really keen. If for whatever reason someone in our portfolio wants to speak to Joe because they like video games, I think the number one thing is like, in order not to waste Joe's time, is to actually give it some thought and not just forward it through. Like, okay, is this person going to be interesting to Joe? Joe cares about video games. This person X is like, doing something in the healthcare space, as awesome as it might be. There's no gaming element. It's probably not going to be relevant to him. So I'm going to cut that out. I'm never going to take it to them. And then the other thing is like, again, instead of framing it away from asking for someone, because, if I beg Joe enough, and Joe's getting worried now, what am I supposed to do?
Take
He
an
might take,
onslaught.
yeah, he might take that intro with an irrelevant person just to like do me a favor because he's being a nice guy, right? But if he's doing it as a favor to me and he has no genuine interest in like doing something with that person, it's a waste of everyone's time. So whilst you make that sort of short-term success moment, oh, we got an intro, we're speaking to Joe, he's really cool, whatever. If everyone from the get-go knows it's not going to go anywhere, you're kind of misleading the person you're trying to help, which I think is doubly cruel. I think like a bit of the tough love initially saying, look, you're not relevant for that person. I understand why you want to speak to them, but it's not the right thing to do. And then, finding someone who is, I think is way more powerful. And then on the previous slide, you had something I like to say a lot, which is like less is more. Often in our environment, people are trying to, everyone's competitive, everyone's trying to prove how helpful they are. And so especially when it comes to like follow-on fundraising, you'll hear people around boards or other investors say like, oh, I made 100 intros for this portfolio company. And it sounds really cool, but sometimes you're there wondering like, okay, and like, did any of them take a call? Did any of them invest? Like, or did you just send 100 spam emails to anyone, to like completely irrelevant funds, right? Out of scope, whatever, they're not deploying in that vertical, blah, blah, blah. Versus like, what if you just made one intro to the 100% right person who takes the call and invests, and then, that portfolio of companies follow on funding round is done and you can move on. Like the power of like getting it once right versus just doing 100 random actions. And because it's, bigger numbers sound better and whatever, we often optimize for volume, I think, which I think is quite strange. So the way I use Getro and the network and so on is to find like the one person for that one moment in time and try and find the right thing for them. So it's not a favor. It's like, hey, person who invests in this type of company, this is the best company fundraising at the moment that fits all your criteria. Obviously, they're going to want to speak to them, right? And if it really is the person, you've just done them a favor. You brought them deal of the century out of the blue. Oh my God, like you're the best person ever, right? And then the final less is more thing, I'll give another analogy of, trying to make Joe worried now about what I'm going to ask for him. If, for example, we made a gaming investment next month, and now it's like one of my priorities to like get clued up about gaming. Given we have all these other things going on in the portfolio, there's basically no amount of time I can invest at this stage in life where I can catch up with Joe's gaming network. He's been doing it for over 10 years. I think you said you spoke to like 250 people in the sector last year, right? I'm never going to be able to do that because I'm covering like 10 sectors. So I'll never be able to catch up. So again, like if suddenly I care about gaming, there's almost no point in me trying to like build a gaming network. Actually, if I was being smart about it, I'm going to take Joe to the pub once a week because he knows everyone in that world. And all I need to know is Joe, who can open up the world of the gaming industry if he so wishes and if it's helpful to him, right? Exactly. I'll buy him a nice pint of this. And then because he's a helpful guy and because he wants to help the people in his network, that's it, job done. So you only really need to know like the one person who can open up a world to you, versus
Yeah.
again, you can trick yourself with large numbers. Okay, now I care about gaming. I'm going to find 100 thought leaders in gaming and I'm going to get to know them. And you're going to do a 1 hour intro call with all of them. And then you're never going to speak to them again because your priority will move on. And like your slide says, it's not going to be particularly strategic because you're always going to be behind that curve.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is me backfitting for my less is more kind of quote.
Yeah, I totally buy that.
I'm justifying just finding excuses to go to the pub with Joe at this point.
Yeah. Joe seems excited.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean,
Maybe a good kind of last question or something to hear from both of you is how do you use Getro? I mean, you mentioned a few different things, but any workflows that you found to be really useful or kind of tips and tricks for folks who may be on the call who have the product and are just thinking about how to get more value out of it?
yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. So yeah, a feature I've been using a lot recently is lists, which I think that comes with the Getro Connect
Yeah.
upgrade. Yeah. So lists, if you're not aware of it, is quite an obvious point, right? So I can create lists of people and share them with founders. Well, I share them with founders. Ultimately, it's an external link I could share with anyone, but I'm mostly sharing these lists with founders. So I got all of Play Ventures to import their LinkedIn first connections into Getro, and I'm looking, and that is just shy of 55,000 contacts we have in there, right? So we have, and our company we've got people who we're a lean but mighty team. The vast majority of us have come from games, so that's like a really solid list of people in the games industry and in tech globally. And that also includes, the 1,100 that have applied and signed up to our talent network. So I can go in there. There's all these features, all these drop downs, and if you're a recruiter and you're familiar with things like LinkedIn, it'll feel pretty similar. But I can go in and do a really specific search. So, for example, the other day, a founder was like, "Hey, we're looking for a UX lead, who's ideally worked on PC and mobile games." I was like, "Cool. Well, let me just see who's in our network first." So I brought up a quick list. I think we had about 30 in that list. So I shared that list on to him, and I was like, "Have a quick browse through there. I can intro you to all of them. Just let me know." And so picked out three. I was first connection with them, someone else on the team was. There's an easy way to start that search, and also founders are just like, "Wow, this is awesome, thank you." Very
Yeah.
appreciative. It's very low hanging fruit. In fact, sometimes with searches, I just do that. I just send them the list, especially if it's like a
Mm,
mid level or like I'm stretched with capacity. I always say to founders, I'm like, "Hey, I will definitely help you with that VP position. But at this like mid-level programmer, that's not best use of my time. But I will send you a list. I always want to do something at least. I'll write you the job description. I'll send you a list of people in our network. You let me know and I'll reach out to them." So it really is taking advantage of all of those connections that we have. And so that's been really powerful. I've been using that a lot. So yeah, I guess that's just you wanted one workflow and one feature I've been
great
using.
one.
So yeah, that one has been a bit of a game changer.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Chris, any thoughts on that for you?
We're again sort of the opposite setup, given we have such a broad focus. So rather than sort of more repeatable instances of things we're keeping an eye on, they're usually one-offs. So, if given we're acting globally, but we're a very small team of 6 people, all based in London, if let's say next month we do a biotech deal in Austin, Texas. Now I care about the Texas biotech scene centered around Austin, and I'm sat here in London. I might try and go to Austin like once a year or something and give me a convenient excuse to go to South by Southwest or something. But like fundamentally staying plugged into that is pretty hard. Yeah, we have the whole team out and about meeting people all the time. So one of those smart lists I would set up then is like, okay, Austin Biotech. Who do we know there at a glance?
Mm,
And then I get the email updates. So like once a week, I think it's once a week, I get an email saying this is changes to that network. And I can see people dropping in and out of that, which is pretty cool because, you know, you might be at a biotech conference. Well, you might be at JP Morgan in San Francisco, right? You might not be thinking about that one portfolio company you've got in Texas.
Mm,
Maybe you don't cover it within the fund, right? It's like not your deal or whatever. It's your colleagues. You kind of, you know, it's not your priority that week, but you connect with
yeah,
someone that's really cool. Now the person who is thinking about it gets that email like, oh, my colleague just connected with that person who says they're like, you know, their LinkedIn thing is like Mr. or Mrs. Biotech of the Year based in Austin. Like, oh my God, you know that person. Uh, let's connect them to our portfolio company. And then bang, you've got a new board advisor or whatever. Super, super low effort, but a really like easy way to keep tabs on what is going on within that wider network of the firm. So things like that.
nice.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. We use that feature a lot too for folks in the network who change their job, that you would just never be able to keep track of all the people in your network who are changing jobs, but all of a sudden they're a decision maker or they're founder now, or there's some relevant context.
Yeah.
Joe, maybe you could jump in and answer the question in Q&A, and then we'll jump into a quick demo just to show some of the new features we've been working on.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for sending question. It's about if you can't see the Q&A for whatever reason, the question is around low quality LinkedIn connections and how do you mitigate against that? Because I said that my team imported all their LinkedIn connections in there. So yeah, that definitely happens. Or you connect to someone, you forget who they are, or you connect to someone and you never talk to them. So had it a lot where I can see someone's connected to someone else on my team. And I'm like, hey, a founder's interested in this person you're connected with. And they're like, I have no idea who that is. And I'm like, that's fine. At least it then gives me some what a good intro that I can use. I can say, well, you're first in connect with them anyway. Can you just drop them a message? And the message could start with something like, hey, we're connected, but I realized we've never actually talked. I would love to talk to you about X, right? Or I will reach out to them and say, hey, I'm just dropping you a message because I noticed you're connected with this person at Play Ventures, and one of our founders spotted your profile and would love a chance to chat with you about X, right? So even if the connection there is not a very strong one or one that the person can really vouch for, you've still got like some meat. I can't think of a better analogy than that. Something
Yeah, it's
to
like a
put on
way
the
in.
yeah
Yeah,
to for that intro message, which you come from recruiting as well, Evan. Having a reason and a compelling intro is always really helpful, and so that's why I like it.
totally. Yeah, and we're also thinking a lot about that at the product level. So some of the new features we're working on will be focused around relationship strength. So trying to understand from email or calendar or work overlaps, things like that, where folks might be more strongly connected or less strongly connected, just to try to give you that heads up within the product. But I agree with you, Joe. Like I do think you can oftentimes reach out, even if you don't have a strong relationship. It can work. Chris.
Going back to the first thing we were discussing about investing in network and relationships and expert networks and more transactional side of things. The crazy power of venture is if you do what Joe just said, hey, we're connected, but I have no idea who you are, like, but let's chat or whatever. The response rate you get is shockingly high. Like I would say probably like 9
Yeah.
out of 10 people are like,
Yeah,
okay, great,
Exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
so
you're not like a
bizarre,
random person. You're
It's like
you're
someone you
making connections
connected
that are
with.
fun.
Yeah, you connected with them 10 years ago, you have no idea who they are. And then you're like, hey, like if your LinkedIn profile didn't say like VC something, whatever, investing in cool founders, supporting cool founders, and you were like, the local baker who's arguably a much more important member of society and that kind of stuff, like, hey, I'm your local baker, like we connected 10 years ago, like
Right. Yeah.
you want to chat, they'd be like, I don't know, man, like
Yeah. Do you want a croissant?
I
Yeah.
don't need any bread right now. You know what I mean? Like there is this interesting
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Most people get the fact that venture is like presents opportunity, is all about connecting people, and it might lead to somewhere. You might connect them to somewhere, they might invest in it, they might get invested, they might get a new job, they might just learn something cool, they might learn about a new product or service, or get to demo it, or play a new game for the first time. Whatever it might be, people really get the joke that there's something to be had from that kind of intangible, informal exchange. And I still think there's something magical to that because it's one of the few things that doesn't have a dollar sign hanging on top of it. Like every other exchange and transfer of value, you kind of know what the price of it is. You know, that's $50, that's $10, whatever. But this is just like a quick message, and that what happens to those two people, if you attach the price tag to it, going back to like the economic model of expert networks, there are many people who'll be willing to pay $1,000 for that kind of exchange.
Yeah.
Yet everyone recognizes in their interest to kind of do it for free and see what happens. And obviously, it's up to a point. At some point, maybe someone gets a job out of it and starts getting paid seriously, and so on. But it's just something fascinating there. And obviously, that's why we love, not to like sell it too much, but that's why we love using the tool, because you actually you send messages out into the ether and you try and connect people up. And then, you know, not all the time, but sometimes truly amazing things happen.
Yeah. I think it goes back to your original point too around making sure the incentives are aligned. It's like you're putting an opportunity on someone's radar. If it actually is a good opportunity, then they're out looking for opportunities too. So you've brought them that opportunity that's aligned. I also think that context is really important. So if you're making that introduction back to the founder, giving them the context of how you know the person really helps. So it's like, I actually don't know this person. I can't vouch for them, but I'm happy to send a message to them and see if I can get their attention, is really different than introducing someone to a potential candidate with the implication that you know them well enough to vouch for them. And so I think your recommendations hold a lot of weight. So giving that context, I think, is super important for any intro. Cool. Okay, let's switch gears. I'm going to jump into a quick demo of Getro Connect, some of the new features that we've launched, and then we can do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll be wrapped. So I wanted to start here for folks who have not done a demo of Getro Connect or who don't have the product. If you were to log into your Getro Jobs account, you'll see some of these features, but there's a couple of new tabs here, and one of them is contacts. So Joe talked about this a little bit, and so Chris, you can import contacts from many different places. Your LinkedIn first degree connections of the team. You can import a CSV file from an event that you may have hosted or from your CRM. And this starts to aggregate all the contacts from your network into one place. And then what we're doing is updating this information with their LinkedIn profile data as it changes over time. So it really becomes one place where you can see people across the network of your team and run all kinds of different searches. We're adding search filters all the time. In some ways, most of these are very similar to like LinkedIn Sales Recruiter or LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Recruiter, to really just try to help you find the people you're looking for as fast as possible. We recently launched a filter where you can use natural language to search. We do have Boolean search terms here in the job title. So if you're looking for a product manager and maybe you want that person to be in New York, you can start to see how kind of like chopping down the list over time. And maybe you want someone with at least 5 years of experience. And if you're doing kind of a search for a company, maybe you want them to have at least 2 years working at the current company, and maybe that's an indicator they might be ready to move. So in the demo network for us, we have 22 folks like this. From here, you can create a list, and we'll go into lists in a second. But you can share that list with the founder, and then they can make requests. We also have a few really interesting filters that LinkedIn doesn't have. One is around company funding stage. So you can see folks who have a certain amount of experience at different funding stages of company. Also, if they've experienced growth from one stage to another. And this is super helpful when you're trying to figure out, does someone have the right type of experience for the company you're recruiting for? Also, you can search across a specific period of when someone worked at a company. So we're seeing lots of customers using this for reference checking, back channeling. If you want to see, do we know anyone in the network who worked at Uber in engineering at the same time as a founder that we're thinking about investing in, for example, you can use that criteria to find that information. So the next thing I wanted to jump into is lists. So this is all great if you're looking to run searches on your own network within the product. You can use some of the light CRM functionality like adding notes and tags. But if you want to share contacts outside of your team, that's where lists come in. So I'm going to jump into another demo network here to show lists. When you create a list, you can create it from a search like we were seeing a minute ago. You can also create lists from this tab here. There's a couple different kinds of lists you could create. For contacts, you might want to create a list of contacts. Like Joe said, you have 5 or 6 people that you want to share with a founder for some reason. You can set auto updates on lists, which is what Chris was talking about. If someone changes jobs in your network, or one of your team members connects with someone at an event and they have a certain criteria that you want to track, you can set up these auto updates. You can also use AI in the platform to match your contacts to open roles from specific jobs. So you can walk through each of those really fast. Here's an example of a list that I created of chief revenue officers. And if I want to share this list with founders, I just click share and I just open this link in a new tab. We're going to be able to see it here. And this is just an open link that I can share with founders. It's possible to password protect this link if you feel like this is private information, but it's also really nice when you don't do that because founders can just see the information, quickly react to it. If you are updating this list over time, founders may want to subscribe to it with their email or Slack, and that makes it really easy for them to see updates without you having to push them back to the list over time. Another type of list is the auto update list. So here's an example of that where I've set the criteria of sales manager, sales director, VP of sales, and the job title. And when I set up this auto updating network, it's just going to keep updated over time. So if someone in our network all of a sudden meets that criteria, they will get added to this list. And then the third type of contact list is around the job matching with our AI technology. So in this case, we grabbed a role here, software engineer for core product at Notion. And you can see what's happening here. The AI is looking at the job description, parsing out all of the key information. So location, company size, and some of the criteria around that job. You can kind of change it if you want to update this information. And then we're also looking at all of the people who are in your contact database, looking at their LinkedIn profile information, parsing that for skills, location, years of experience, and making these recommendations. From here, you can search through these recommendations we're making. You can easily kind of add these people over to a list, and then you can share that list with founders in a very similar way. The last thing I want to talk about is lists of companies. So we talked about lists of contacts. We also just launched a new set of features around being able to build and share lists of companies. So this is really most useful for the sales use case. So if you have a founder who is prospecting and they're looking to sell their product to more companies, they might share a list of their prospects with you, asking you for help. You can easily put those companies into a list and then quickly see who do we know at each of the companies that our founder is trying to prospect for. You can see their roles. You can easily filter by job title, company funding stage to really try to hone in on the ICP for that company. And from there, you can share this list and offer introductions to founders. You can also ask for intros from folks within your network. So if you click this button, you can share a link, and this creates a page where you can share this list with, you can share it with LPs, you can share it with other people on your team. If you have an expert network, you can share it with specific people to say, hey, I'm trying to help this portfolio company with sales. Can you take a look at this list and see if you know anyone? And from this list, those individuals can connect their LinkedIn and easily see who they know. So for example, my LinkedIn's connected, and these are the people in my network who I know at these companies, and I could offer this intro. We're also making this functionality available to your portfolio companies. So they can log in to Getro, they can build these lists, and they can share the lists and ask for introductions. So this is super powerful. We're building lots of features very quickly here at Getro because we're very, very passionate about this use case. So really excited to have more folks using it and trying it out with our demo. I'm going to stop here and just have a couple minutes for questions. I'll go back to the presentation. We have about 5 more minutes left. I'm curious if any folks have questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A and we can talk through them. Kathleen, you want to jump in?
Yeah, we did have one question. Someone's asking, is the Getro Connect product available as a standalone, or does it have to be bundled with Getro Jobs? This is late breaking news, but it can now be a standalone product. So if you or your portfolio companies are interested in just the Connect piece, we are happy to help with that. And you are able to buy that separately, and have your own instance there.
Hey Evan, that was great running through. I was actually in Getro following along in real time with some of those features, and I have to say I'm really impressed with uh the AI search, just the natural
Mm.
language. I was playing around with that whilst you were talking through it, and it works
Oh, cool.
incredibly well. So yeah, really impressed.
Nice. Thank you. That's a very new feature. I think we launched that maybe even last week. Um, yeah, I'm curious,
That's
Joe and
Not
Chris, if
tried
there were any
that.
things what'd you say, Chris?
I have not tried that. I need to play with the AI search.
Yeah, I was curious to know
yeah.
if there were any things you guys saw me go through that you haven't even seen yet.
Yeah, that one, for example.
Yeah, the companies list actually. So, what came to mind first of all, because there's a tons and tons of layoffs going on in the games industry, and it has been the last two
Mm,
years.
yeah.
So, I'm constantly sharing these layoff lists and constantly getting founders being like, "Oh, like this company or this studio just shut down or was making layoffs. Can you either get me a layoff list or can you intro me to people there and stuff?" So yeah, that company, like being able to just be like, who are we connected to at this studio or at this company, in light of recent news, is really cool.
Mm,
And like just makes that whole creation of that list just incredibly easy. There's other breaking news things and other reasons why you'd want to quickly build lists for a particular company, but that was just something that came to mind quickly. So yeah.
yeah, I love that. On the layoff list concept as well, we also see customers using the contact list there. So if a portfolio company sends you a layoff list from their team, you can kind of import that as a CSV into Getro, make a list of those people, and then it just immediately makes that searchable for founders instead of sending a list in Excel, they have to click every single LinkedIn, they have to go to each page. It's just not searchable. And so I think before using Getro, folks use Airtable or Excel for some of those problems, but Getro just allows there to be more searchability. So and we're also working on a new feature around introduction requesting from contact lists. So soon you'll be able to have founders request those intros directly from the list. You'll be able to see those intro requests and manage them in a more centralized place.
That's a great call as well with the layoffs list, just saving the founders admin, and they're just getting them more used to using Getro and more familiar with that. It's a good shout. I
Cool.
was also going to shout out Katie Rice, messaged me and connected with me on LinkedIn. So thanks for that. You're all of you are welcome to do that as well if you would like. So yeah, appreciate it.
Speaking of Katie, she just had a really good point in the Q&A, which is that she's interested in a use case of connecting potential investors to portfolio companies, and was curious if the workflow works the same way. It does. We do have a lot of customers starting to do that as well. So not only from the talent or the sales perspective, but also to help portfolio companies find other investments. Using the company list and putting in follow-on funders is a good way. Or even using your contacts list to find investors at specific funds that you think would be a good match for them.
That is, in fact, my main use case. So,
Mm.
Katie, I'll send you an email after this, and we can chat about it because I think we're at time. But it works, is the TLDR.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Again, we will be sending the recording after the call, as well as some snippets of just kind of the high points from today. And obviously, thank you so much, Chris and Joe, for your time.
Thanks for having us. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
And thanks, Kathleen and Johnny.
Bye.